Now, learning Python would be no fun if you were to simply watch and observe what I do throughout this course. That's why we're going to get you set up with Python, as well as install a text editor that will allow you to write your code so that you can code along with me and experience the benefits of Python firsthand. It's only when you get stuck in and immerse yourself in the coding world when you will really start to understand how it works and how it can be used to its full potential. If you have Python 3 installed as well as a text editor, feel free to move on to the next video. If you haven't, continue watching and we'll have you set up in a few minutes. Now, whenever I get a new laptop or a PC and want to install Python, I usually opt for the same installation option every time, and this is Anaconda. This will not only install Python on your machine, but it will also come pre-installed with very useful packages that you will no doubt use in your coding journey. So rather than downloading Python and then installing common packages separately, you can install Anaconda, which comes pre-shipped with some very useful stuff. One of these things being Jupyter Notebook, which we will be predominantly using in this course to learn the Python language. So if this route sounds right for you, then all you need to do is type www.anaconda.com into a web browser, and this will take you to the Anaconda homepage. Right in the middle, you will see the ability to download Anaconda for Windows. So if you are operating a Windows machine, click the green button. Otherwise, you can select the little apple icon for Mac downloads or the penguin icon for Linux downloads. Seeing as I'm using a Windows machine, I will simply click on the green button. And when I do this, the Anaconda graphical installer will start downloading instantly. If you've selected Mac, just download the 64-bit graphical installer, or if you've selected Linux, download the 64-bit installer for Linux, and your download will start respectively. Now this will take some time to run, so take yourself off, make a coffee or tea, and it should be done when you're back. Rather than you sitting and waiting for this to download on my side, I will fast forward this part to save time. Now once done, open the file that was downloaded, and you'll be presented with the Anaconda setup wizard like so. Now just like most installations, you can hit next to continue, and you need to agree to the license agreement. So give this a read if you wish, but in short, to use this distribution, you need to agree to it. Next, you can select Just Me for the installation type, and then hit Next. You will then be asked to choose an installation location. Now I'm happy with the default destination folder that is appearing here in my C drive and users, then Tom, but if you would like to change your location, then you have the ability to browse and select your location accordingly. You will then be presented with some advanced options, but for this, I would recommend selecting Register Anaconda 3 as my default Python 3.9 and then simply hit Install. When you do this, it will take a few minutes to perform the installation. Now once the installation has complete, you can hit Next, and then you are presented with some helpful tips and resources to get you started. But at this point, you are done. So you can click Finish and you will now have Python installed on your machine. It's that easy. Now not only will you have Python installed on your machine, but you will also have what is known as Jupyter Notebook, which we'll introduce more in a minute, but let's open this up to see that it's installed everything correctly. So in your search bar, type Anaconda, and this will bring up the Anaconda prompt, which is what you're trying to find. Select this, and you will then be presented with a blank screen and a base location, which would coincide with where Anaconda was installed if you didn't start changing the location of installation. Now at this point, just type Jupyter Notebook and then hit Return. This will open up a web browser and you are now inside Jupyter. Welcome. To start a new notebook, click on New on the right hand side here, and then select Python 3, and you'll be taken to a blank Jupyter Notebook where we can now write code. Now if Python was installed correctly, we should be able to write some code and for the code to then be interpreted and run correctly. So to prove this, I can quickly type A equals 1, then I can put B equals 2, and then I can press Shift Enter to run this code cell. When I now type A plus B and then press Shift and Enter, we get 3 returned to the screen, which tells me we are set up correctly. Don't worry about what this code represents for now and what we've just typed our code into. This will all be explained in upcoming videos. As of now, this just tells us we are set up and ready to go. Now there will be times when you want to write your code outside of Jupyter Notebook. And in this course, we do have projects in which we code outside of Jupyter Notebook. So the next thing you'll need is a text editor or an integrated development environment in which you can write some code. Now my personal favorite at the moment is Visual Studio Code, but there are many other options such as PyCharm, Sublime Text, Atom, Notepad++, and a whole lot more. Now the debate over which is the best is forever ongoing, but you should come to find one you enjoy using and just go with that. At the end of the day, it's used to write code and they more or less achieve the same thing, albeit with some plugins that can make the experience of writing and creating code files a little easier. Now downloading an integrated development environment is no harder than Googling your IDE of choice. So let's for example say we want to download Visual Studio Code. So if I type Visual Studio Code into a web browser, here we are then presented with the Visual Studio Code's website. And I can see here we have a download option. So if I click this, I can then select my operating system. In my case it's a Windows machine, but choose yours respectively. When I do this, Visual Studio Code user setup starts downloading. And when it's complete, I'm able to open the file. When I do this, in a very similar way to Anaconda, I get a license agreement for which I need to accept. So I can click on accept and then next. I can then select the destination of the installation, so I'll leave this as the default path that appears in this window. I can then click next. I can then select a start menu folder, so I'll just click next on this menu. I can then choose some additional tasks, but I'll leave it selecting register code as an editor for supported file types, as well as adding Visual Studio Code to path. I can then hit next. This will then install Visual Studio Code, and once it's complete, Visual Studio Code will then automatically open. You are now set up with the ability to write code in files within Visual Studio Code. So if I create a new text file and select Python as my language of choice, I can now start typing code and then we can save the file and run it accordingly. But more on this later. For now, you are set up with Python, you are set up with Jupyter Notebook, and you are set up with an integrated development environment if you've chosen Visual Studio Code. So if you have managed to get all of the above installed, you should have everything you need to start coding along with me and learning the wonderful language of Python. If you have run into any issues with the installation, please feel free to reach out to me in a personal message and we'll try to address your issue and get you set up as quickly as possible. With the installation out of the way, next up we'll take a look at some command line basics. So I'll see you in the next video.